its intent really is to do post-processing after you've outputted your rendering. So knowing that, let's go ahead and open a finished rendering. I'm going to go File, Open. And then within that tutorial file that I gave you, not your folder structure, you should have a Photoshop folder. And within the Photoshop folder is a sample interior residential rendering, and then also this Picasso. We'll get to Picasso in a minute. We're going to go ahead and open this residential interior. Go ahead and open. Copy. Girl. So while you're doing that, hopefully if anybody has any errors, you can. There's one thing I want to kind of look for and see if I included with your file, which I can't quite remember if I did or not. Which I hope I did. Within here. Nope. Nope. Huh? Nope. Is it in there? Image basics? Yeah. Okay. So then in that image basics folder, one other thing too, that we didn't get into last class, I want to talk about putting a person into my rendering. So that's something you guys will, and ladies will do quite often. They always want people. So I'm going to go ahead and File, Open. And I'm going to go to that image basics. I'm going to go ahead and open my 2012 Person 01. Right, so what's nice about my personal library, and when we get into really doing the renderings, I will give you a lot of people that are already cut out. Right, so somebody has to come along, pick an image off the internet, and then they basically come around in Photoshop and they cut out the pictures and pixels that they want. Now, to speed up your time, right, if you can find a library of pre-cut material, right, I can just drag and drop them into my renderings, right, which is how my library is set up. I probably have like 1,000 different people that are already tiffed and already cut out that have a transparency layer embedded into them, and I can drag and drop them in. So in this case, what that is handled through a channel. And if I look at my channels, so I have my layers, and I have channels. Within channels, I don't see the alpha channel, and that's because I've removed it from there. But typically, as we get more advanced with it, and we'll talk about it more when we get to renderings, what the alpha channel does. Unfortunately, I think I picked the wrong one. It's another one that has the alpha channel. In this case, ignore it. Don't worry about it. Typically, if I wanted just to select everything, I can do Control and click, and it would select all the RGB values. The alpha channel is a black and white, positive, negative. I would select the alpha channel to select everything. In this case, I don't have that, so we can deselect, so it's Control D or Command D on the Mac. Select my layer 1, Control A or Command A to select all with layer 1 selected. So I'm selecting the content on layer 1. I'm doing Control C or Command C for copy, whatever your PC or whatever. If you're working on a Mac, whenever you hear me say Control, it means Command. If you're working on a PC, Control is Control. Clear? How you doing there, Chica? Hanging in there? All right, cool. How are you doing? You good? Okay. I wasn't quite worried about. How are you doing back there? My other non-Photoshop user. Not well? Okay. So let's see here. What are you stuck with? Command D to deselect. Oh, that's open. So you want Command A first to tell it to deselect that. Right? Command A. And then grab. Yep. Then we're going to obviously go into our rendering, and we're going to paste our person in. Control V, right? So there's my lady. sorry ladies, I didn't provide a male counterpart for this lady. At 5 o'clock this morning, I was not thinking about the male counterpart for my room. Right? Now, the thing is matching perspectives, right? So, you know, it's part of doing a rendering. Putting people is something that I always do in Photoshop, right? So she's already kind of set up, right, to be placed kind of like over here in my rendering. So we're talking like balance of an image. Now, if she was really in real time, right, and I look at the size of her, she's like Amazon woman, man. She's like, you know, those are 10-foot ceilings in the rendering and everything else. So, you know, let's go ahead and begin to scale her. So this is what you do. You first locate where you kind of want her. And I'm talking about balance, right? So the window, whenever we design a space, it's always about the view. So if I have a rendering about the view, right, and make sure the view is there. So I'm not going to block my view. And things, you know, it's really about blocking out. So some operations I can do with existing images are always under the Edit menu. And under Edit, I can transform, right? So do I want to make her walking this way, right? So she's walking from what? She's got bags, right? Right, so where would she be walking from with the bags? Probably from the table where the bags were before she was walking out the door, right? Or maybe she's walking in the door with the bags and everything else. But you got to think, it's the perspective of where the camera shot of her was taken does not afford me the opportunity to put her face on walking in the door, right? So be cognizant of what you choose. Don't stick her right there. I'm going to say, oh, she's walking out the door, but she's walking facing this way. So we can also go ahead and flip her. So if I go flip, and I always get this wrong, flip horizontal, right? So horizontal is this way. So if I say flip on horizontal, it's going to flip her upside down. If I flip vertical, it's going to flip her this way, right? Am I wrong? What are you shaking your head? Am I wrong? I think I might be wrong, because I get this wrong every time. Ah, I was right. So what are you telling me? Wait a minute. Oops. So now she's walking on the ceiling. You told me you never use Photoshop. What is this? See, when I think, and this is going to come up again. I'm going to test you when you get to AutoCAD. When we start doing 3D, it's completely opposite. Okay? That's why I get tripped up. I knew CAD before I knew Photoshop. All right, so we're going to flip horizontal and then edit, flip vertical again. There we go. All right, so now she's walking in kind of the door there. She's walking over being like, I am famished, I'm getting out of these heels, I'm going to put these bags down on that table, I'm going to take my phone, I'm going to sit on that couch. Awesome. Next thing is scaling, right? I'm going to scale the image. I'm going to hold down Shift. And then I'm going to scale her down so that she's proportional. So right, she's probably 5'6", maybe, kind of estimating here. And if I put her right about there in the space, her hand's about at the table, right? So, you know, your counter table's right about like this. I'm 6 foot tall, so counter height hand kind of thing. It's trying to get the thing scaled up correctly. So I think, you know, try and kind of eyeball that a little bit better. Maybe make her a little bit taller. Okay. So there she is, walking in the space. Now, that's fine, right? She's cut out nicely. You can learn how to cut out images based on whatever you Google. It's pretty easy. Now, the one thing that becomes an issue when people place people, or students, or any designers, place people into renderings is the lack, the here-on lack of understanding of what shadow is and how to use it. Right? Because right now she's kind of just floating there, right? I have sunlight coming in this way, which means I have light transferring this way, and even though I don't really have a shadow, these shadows are then bringing light this way a little bit from the interior, so I want to try and match this shadow place so she looks rooted. Right now she looks like she's floating on the picture, right? You want to get her so she's looking like she's standing on the actual floor itself, right? So to do that, to duplicate the layer, I'm going to go ahead and call my layer. So I'm going to double click layer 1 and call that woman, right? And then I'm going to drag, so a quick way to, yes. Okay, so I double click with my left mouse button on the text. No? Oh, yeah, if you haven't, so when you're scaling something, sometimes you need to hit enter to accept the scale. Then it'll allow you to enter into a new operation. I see a smile back there. It makes me think that you got something right.
I did.
Awesome. That's why I teach. It smiles like that right there. Cool. Everybody else got the layer name changed? Yeah. Alrighty. So then I got woman. Now, two ways to duplicate a layer that I use. I can right click on the layer itself and I can duplicate it. A faster way you should get in the habit of doing is down here where you see like the FX and the trash bin and everything else, is I can click and drag that layer down, and I don't want to put it on the trash, but right next to that is that post-it note, similar to the post-it note in InDesign. To make a new page, I can duplicate my layer, right? So then I get woman copy. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on that name, right? So again, if I'm stuck in a command, escape always is your best friend as well. I'm going to double click and call that woman, not copy, but woman shadow. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to create a shadow out of her. So to do that, I need to first desaturate all the color out of her. So what color are shadows? They're typically dark, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go Image, Adjustments. And I'm going to leave this hang up here. I'm going to go to Desaturate. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. In order for sake of, I guess, showing you some adjustment things, I'm going to take the long way of doing this. This is the short route. Go ahead and click on desaturate. She'll become black and white. So that shows you that image adjustments can happen per layer or by global. So when we did the lecture, we did it globally with an adjustment layer. In this case, we made her coming out of like something like the Munsters, old school TV show. And now what I'm going to do is also then do image adjustments, brightness, contrast on her. So I'm going to take her brightness all the way down and her contrast all the way up. And I'm going to do it again until I get her to almost all the way black, right? Almost there. Right? Slow way to do it. There's way faster ways to do this, but for safety's sake of trying to get this going. So she should look like that, right? Who knows a better way to do that? Phil. Yeah, we got it. So that's where the alpha channel would come into play. We would use that and just fill. We would copy the alpha channel over from that existing file. In this case, right, if you don't have it and you just want to quickly do this, it's a fast way to do. You know, whenever I have an intern working in the office, my office, or with me, right, that's pretty much what they'll do is update my library, putting shadows on people, or like start using Photoshop or things like that. Alrighty, next. So, again, looking at the image, I kind of have a variety of shadow play going on. I have one coming like a little bit this way, and I have a little bit coming this way. And it's a pretty bright scene. So the shadow is not going to be like this stark, like really sharp, I'm in the sunlight shadow, right? So let's start distorting our shadow, at least getting it placed, and then we'll start blending it in. So I'm going to go to Image, or I'm going to go back to the Edit menu. Now, under the transform bar, there's a few varieties. Now, the best ones I found, right, perspective's a kind of good one. Sometimes I found that distort is definitely the best. Skew is only going to go this way and this way, right? It's like if I ever tried to build out of 2x4s a box and not brace my box, I rack it, right? 2 goes this way. That's skewing. Distort will allow me to push and pull that thing any which way I want. So let's go ahead and do distort. Alright, and then I can click and drag her down. So the tricky thing is getting her so she looks as if she's laying on the ground itself here, right? And you'll see, especially when they're like walking and things like that, getting that particular part to line up with her leg is always a pain in the butt. But you know, it's that subtlety of detail that begins to make this look more and more real. So again, you kind of, and you're going to get it wrong the first 2 or 3 times that you do it, right? And in my case, like, okay, that's right, kind of. Good enough for what I'm trying to do. Okay. And I'll give you a second or two to kind of get caught up on that. Now, typically you control your shadow, so if you're already caught up, you'll want to change the woman to be above the shadow in the layer stack, so her feet appear above the shadow itself. How's the distortion going there for you guys, ladies? What's that? Yeah, distort's tricky, huh? Yeah. I mean,
kind of weird. But
yeah, I mean, I know.
there you go.
Kind of tricky for the world.
And then
Alright, so again, yeah, I mean, you're gonna, it takes a little bit of practice. Even I don't get it right the first shot. Again, a lot of times, like, it's so subtle that if I'm trying just to get it out to the client, I just plop it in, forget the shadows, do the shadows on the final run. Anyways, but you need to know how to do it. So the next part of this would be to then desaturate the opacity of that, so it looks like I begin to bleed out color, right? Right? So it's kind of, I try to match the color of the shadow, right? Something really, really subtle. Begin to anchor her, right? I try and match the color of this shadow with whatever surrounding shadows are on that floor. And for safety's sake of just doing that, I'll increase the shadow a little bit. Now she's kind of anchored on the ground. And again, you would then play with the shadow from there. The last part of that, and because my shadow's so subtle, unless I print this and I see this overlapping on my graphics over here, I'm not going to worry about cutting it out. Right? I want to blur that shadow, so right now it's still sharp. So to blur it, there's the blur tool on the left. See it right there? Looks like an eye drop. Raindrop. Raindrops falling on the head. There. Do the blur tool. And the sizing of that is adjusted at the top. So right now my pixels, so how many pixels am I using? I'm going to increase that to be, you know, something a little larger. Right, so I can see that circle still not big enough. Right, that's about big enough for me. So I'm down here now with it. So once I select the raindrop on the left, I can adjust the size of that. And I can just blur Making sure I'm selecting the layer of women's shadow. I'm just going to blur that out as much as I can. Right, it takes a little while to do it. If I zoom in on it, I can see more of an effect happening on it. Right, so you'll see that it kind of removes that hard edge on mine. You know, and I would probably want to get the shadow matched up with that, but for safety's sake, that's how you put a shadow underneath her. Right. And you can adjust her skew, so right now her back right leg isn't quite matching with the ground. She still looks like she's floating. So I would just then skew her down so she matches that shadow. Yeah.